Hello guys and welcome back. In today's video I'm going to show you how to drape a skirt sloper like this one. First you will need to determine the length and width of the muslin that will be needed to drape the front and back of the skirt. You will need 6 measurements. Technically they are 4 because 2 of them are repeated for the center front and center back. Dress form represents a person's body. This dress form represents my body. You will need the length, the center front width, the center back width, and the hip level. Starting with the length, I measured from the waist to a desired skirt length. This length applies to the center front and center back. For this tutorial, I measured 23 inches for length. Next, measure the center front width. Measure from the side seam all the way to the center front. And I measured 9 1/4. Center back width measurement. Measure from the center back line all the way to the side seam. And I measured 11 inches. Next, measure your hip level line. Measure from the waist to your hip level. I measured 8 inches. So here are the measurements that we took earlier on the dress form. These measurements will be used to determine the amount of muslin that will be needed for draping. The center front muslin is 25 by 15. The length of the muslin is 23, which is your desired skirt length, plus 2 equals 25. And the width is 9 1/4, which is your hip level width, plus 5 inches of extra length equals 14 1/4. I rounded that up to 15. The hip level is 8 inches, which is your waist to hip level measurement. The center back is also 25 by 15. The length of the skirt is 23 plus 2 inches extra for draping equals 25. The width is your 11 plus 4 inches equals 15. And the hip level is 8 inches, which is your waist to hip level measurement. I would like to add that the extra length that you add to your length and width measurement doesn't have to be what I added, but rather the amount of extra length that would be needed for your own draping process. For a basic skirt sloper, 2 to 3 inches is about what is needed on the length and width. I cut out 2 pieces of muslin that are 25 inches long and 15 inches wide, and I blocked them. One piece is going to be used to drape the center front, and the other piece, the second piece, is going to be used to drape the center back. Blocking is a process in which you pull the fabric on a diagonal or bias to try and make the length side and width side equal. Here I'm just going to show you the process of how to block a muslin on the center front piece. You should block your center front and center back if they're not equal. So here I'm just folding the fabric to see if they're equal, and you could see that one side of it is not equal, so I'm going to pull it on a bias to try and make it equal. Here I'm just measuring my muslin to make sure the sides are equal. I continue to measure and pull on a bias to try and get equal sides length. Here I continue to pull on the bias and measure again to make sure all my sides are equal. Once the blocking process is completed, the next step is to transfer your measurements onto the muslin for draping. Next, transfer the measurements onto the muslin. First, draw a 1-inch center front line along the length of the muslin. Second, measure 2 inches down from the top edge of the muslin, which was the 2 inches that we added to the skirt length, and square out about 1 to 2 inches. From that 2-inch mark, measure down 8 inches indicating your hip level and square out across the muslin. Finally, fold the muslin at the 1-inch center front line. Once this is done, you're ready to drape the center front skirt. Repeat this process of transferring the measurement onto the muslin for the center back. To start draping the front, pin the muslin onto the dress form at center front. Pin the 2-inch mark to the waist. Make sure that the hip line on the muslin aligns with the hip line on the dress form and that both lines are parallel to the floor. Aligning all the lines gives a straight and smooth draping. Pull the muslin over to the side seam, making sure the hip line on the muslin aligns with the one on the dress form. Pinch a bit of ease at the hip line and pin at side seam. The purpose of the pinch is for ease of movement, so you can move when wearing the skirt. Add more pin along the hip line to secure it in place. Using your fingernail to feel for the seam, pin along the side seam to the bottom of the skirt. Then pin the remaining side seam up to the waist. Once the side seam is done, move on to creating the dart. There's a pocket of excess fabric formed at the waist. This excess will be used to create the dart. Smooth the muslin over to the princess line from the center front and mark that point. Then fold the muslin at the mark and tuck excess under. Continue to tuck excess under to a vanishing point. Here is a draping tip. You could move and pin your pinch of ease to the side if it's interfering with your dart formation as I am showing here, and then go ahead and create your dart. You will notice some tension on the muslin at the waist. To ease the tension, slash the muslin at waist up to the waistline until tension disappears. Be careful not to slash beyond the waistline. Here I'm just repinning my muslin onto the dress form to get a smooth surface. Finally, the last step is marking. Mark along the waistline, dart, and side seam. When you reach the bottom of the side seam, use the wire on the dress form to continue your side seam drawing. Here I'm just making the mark on the dart and waist at side seam bolder for better visibility. Draping the center back is like the center front. First, pin the muslin along the center back line. Start by pinning the 2-inch mark to the waist, then the hip line mark to the hip line on the dress form. And pin all the way to the bottom of the dress form. Then align the hip line on the muslin with the hip line on the dress form. Make sure that both the hip line on the muslin and dress form are parallel to the floor. Here I pinned a side seam to hold the muslin in place. Pin along the hip line to secure it in place. Before you get to the side seam, pinch a bit of ease and pin it down. Pin to the side seam. Using your fingernail to feel for the seam, pin the side seams. Just like the center front, a pocket of excess fabric is formed at the waist and that will be used to create the dart. I started to create my dart but realized that it was too big and just doesn't look nice. So I created 2 smaller darts instead. To create the first dart, smooth the muslin from the center back to the princess line and mark. Then fold the muslin at the mark and tuck excess under. Create the second dart about 3/4 to 1 inch from the first dart. Pin both darts to their vanishing points. Slash the muslin along the waist to ease the tension. Be sure not to slash beyond the waistline. Just like before, do all your markings. Mark the side seam, waist, and the darts. Once the draping is completed on the center back, the next step is to draw in your lines on your drape muslin. So here I'm just drawing in my lines, drawing in my dart. I'm trying to find the middle of the dart and draw the dart middle, and then I drew my dart legs. I drew my side seam using my French curve ruler. I pinned back the dart. Draw in my waistline. And then added my 1/2 inch seam allowance all around. Then I cut out my skirt, my center front skirt. When I placed the center front and center back skirt side by side, I realized that the center back side seam doesn't match the side seam on the center front. To correct the side seam on the back skirt, I pinned back both the front and back skirt onto the dress form. Then I laid the back side seam over the front side seam and copied the front side seam onto the back side seam to give me a matching side seam on both the front and back. After correcting the error on the center back side seam, I drew in the lines, included the dart, and added 1/2 inch seam allowance and cut out the center back skirt. Then I pinned my center front and center back skirt together at the side seam so I could put it on the dress form to see how it fits. Then pin the skirt back onto the dress form. This is where you check for fit. Make sure that all the lines on the muslin aligns with all the ones on the dress form, namely the center front line, the side seam line, the center back line, the waistline, the darts, and the hip line.